Greetings and welcome to the Richard Dolan Show, where every week we fight the good fight. You know, the Bob Lazar story is probably, the most dramatic, the most powerful, the most controversial, uh, the most profound story, perhaps, in all of the history of the UFO or UAP phenomenon. I don't really know of a story that has really captured the imagination of the public in quite the same way. And I recall years and years of arguing with people who wanted to debunk it. There's never been that shortage of individuals who just think the whole thing was a hoax. I never felt that way. I was once I dove into it many years ago, I always was persuaded that this was a true story. And the story has had some good treatments over the years, but truly the best treatment of Bob Lazar's story has just appeared starting April 3rd. It is Project Gravitur. The real inspiration and creator behind it is this man right here, Luigi Venditelli, who is a friend of mine and Tracy's. Luigi, welcome to the program.
Richard, it's so great to see you.
Right back at you. Now, we've been aware that you have been working on this for 3 or 4 years. This has been a massive endeavor for you, and I want you to talk all about it, but I will just say this. We do have your trailer. We're going to play that. But what I will say is the most immediately, obviously important thing that you have done is you and your team have gone through the meticulous process of graphically recreating Bob Lazar's experience at S-4 from 1988, 1989, as well as can possibly be done. And you did it without AI primarily. This is all like handcrafted CGI.
Right.
Beautifully done. And I know that you were meticulous in your recreation of that, and you can talk all about that. So I would just like to congratulate you. Tracy and I watched it, and we both thought it was certainly the best treatment of the Lazar story yet done. Congratulations to you and Bob.
Well, I really appreciate that, especially coming from you. That means a lot.
So, well, you're quite welcome. I've got the trailer here. How about we start with that?
Sure.
About 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then we can jump in and talk about this film. But I think people should see this trailer as well. Here we go.
Physical evidence now exists which proves that there is life elsewhere, and at least one form of that life has been here. As of 1989, that evidence was in the custody of the United States government. Between December of 1988 and April of 1989, I worked as a senior staff physicist in what has to be the most secret project in history. My job in this program was to be part of a back engineering team. This particular disc appeared to be in excellent condition, and because of its sleek appearance, I nicknamed it the Sport Model. The goal in this program was to see if the technology of the disc could be duplicated with Earth materials. To start up the reactor, of course, we need some element 115. In fact, you need 223 grams, machined into a wedge like this. The program out at S-4 consisted of 3 projects: Project Galileo, Project Sidekick, and Project Looking Glass.
The file on top was Project Galileo, and as it turned out, that's the project that I was part of. And that clearly referred to reverse engineering a recovered alien spacecraft.
Just cannot be a secret from anyone, not just the American people, but the rest of the world.
All this stuff is something that happened to him. It's not who he is.
They're doing everything they can to keep this information secret.
That's empirical evidence. I saw a craft to do that, thanks to him.
Help this story spills. the world change.
Are you there? Oh, let's.
I'm
yeah.
here.
Here we go. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was very artfully done as well, the trailer. My last observation, and then I just want to jump in here with you,
Of course.
is that I feel that you very artfully combined these kind of graphic recreations of Bob's story as it happened in 1989, very, very, very nicely, while bringing in Bob Lazar today and George Knapp today and Gene Huff today and all of the other people involved to get their perspectives from all those years ago. And it was very seamless. So congratulations again. I do think this is going to be a real definitive treatment. I'll have all of the links for the film below. We'll have those all up for people who want to learn more about it. So,
Amazing.
So I don't really know where to start on this, Luigi. I guess I will start with Tracy's observation.
Yeah.
About how you and Bob really were made for each other, because you really have one mad scientist, Bob Lazar, meeting another kind of a mad scientist, you yourself. You do sort of fit that bill. People don't know you, but you are I would say, a fanatically meticulous creator who had a very specific vision, and you just threw yourself into this. I don't know if anyone else would have been able to do exactly what you did. So congratulations on that.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's the perfectionism is to my detriment sometimes, because people around me say it's too much, you know. And I think it's the only place I'm going to really exaggerate specifically on this time, because for the very first time, I've been, I've been involved in this field since I was a kid. I mean, I've been in it since 1987, and we never get things that are very highly detailed when we hear the stories. Visually, I'm talking about. We hear the stories, they're very detailed, but visually it's hard to get specifics. And I just said, okay, let me just use my, my insanity to perfect something visually, so that we can actually understand. I mean, if this is all real, which I do believe it is, we have to look at it and say, all right, what exactly does this stuff look like? What does it really feel like, look like? How does it behave really? And I wanted to do that. I thought it was something that we all deserved in the field, because we actually get to see it through the eyes, or helped through the eyes of the person who witnessed it. And so it could maybe even help us connect dots elsewhere if we start understanding it visually. I'm a very visual person. So the more I see things, and if I understand them, I usually understand them more if I see them, then maybe it'll help me connect dots elsewhere. And that could maybe help things move forward, simply because we now have the technology to do that. So that was kind of a goal. And so I'm glad it's transmitting properly to people, like you say, he's a mad scientist. I was really hoping people wouldn't think it was too detailed. So I'm happy that it's being received well.
No, the detail is really what makes it special in my view. I know you and Bob were on Rogan the other day, and I caught that. And one thing that you pointed out, which I found impressive, was the whole act of recreation. It wasn't simply to bring this back all to life, which yes, but also I think you were, is it fair to say, almost testing certain aspects of Bob's story by seeing how well they could be recreated. Like, did this line of sight work this way? Yeah. How did the specifications fit? Did everything fit properly and look right? So that was something that you did. And it seems as though everything came across very realistically.
Well, I mean, that's exactly it. It's basically, and this is something that is really important to say when we talk about recreating something in a 3D environment today, 2026 today, it's literally creating another alternate universe. It's like an alternate place you could go visit. And it's not just designed to be visual. It's not just for entertainment purpose, but it's also for research. Okay.
Yeah.
And in fact, this technology could be used for so many different reasons. Even if you wanted to solve a crime, if you wanted to investigate how, even if an architect wanted to design a building and know how much light is going to be in the building, you could use this technology before you build a building to see what it's actually going to look like in there at 4:00 p.m. when it's a sunny day. So the technology allows you to have real physics and real earth, real light physics, essentially. Basically,
Yeah.
it's real.
Can you
And-
talk a little more about this, the actual technology and methodology that you used? You did a lot of good research, which I want to get into that as well. But the means by which you did these creations, because most of them were not AI.
Right.
Most of what you did was, can we say, old-fashioned CGI? Not really old-fashioned, though.
Yeah.
You were using some real state-of-the-art tech. So could you just describe that for listeners?
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point, because I see a lot of comments out there. I've seen a lot of people say it's great use of AI, which there was AI used in the film. If we consider the 100% of the whole film, 90% of the visuals were handmade with Blender. So this was a lot of work created by a lot of different people alongside myself to basically recreate this as realistically as possible. At the very last stage, we utilized AI to kind of tie a bow on it, but kind of
Fill in some gaps, I assume.
Exactly. And especially when you have specific things that would, let's say, we have a specific scene with a person in there, and we can create that 2-second clip with AI. Why not use AI? It's doable. We could use it because we're still utilizing our 3D environment and our 3D actor to create that movement. So there are little instances where you see AI, but I could assure you the cost of making this was not an AI prompt cost. It was a real handmade job. Yeah.
Yeah. But toward that, you created, and this actually was not evident in the film, but I know that you have created a kind of immersive 3-dimensional recreation of S-4, which and I had a little bit of a demonstration of that a year ago with you, which was awesome. So there's a great amount of technical background work that went into this. And it does show in the film itself. It absolutely is displayed. But I guess maybe it's enough for our purposes, just for people to realize you had a very sophisticated software system.
Yeah.
I think with some very good people working with you, working for you, and a good team that really recreated, like, the long hallway that Bob went down there when he enters the facility. The interior of the big hangar, the recreation of the sport model craft itself. These are all very, very nicely done. And also, let me just say, recreating a young Bob Lazar.
Yeah, that was interesting.
That was not bad.
Yeah.
That was not bad. That was actually really. I thought, wait, is this actual real Bob Lazar video from that time?
That was actually done. We started de-aging Bob in 2023. We had requested that we have all these weird videos of Bob because we actually needed him to put like a hairnet on around his head, and we had to scan his face. And then we utilized old images from the 80s and the 90s of Bob Lazar, which when he's younger, and then try to adapt those with the bone structure and everything, and to turn that into a fluid movement face so that it could look like he's actually, a young Bob Lazar. And it worked. We did a good job at it. Yeah. And there's times where we actually also did that for Gene Huff. There's a couple of shots in there that we have a younger Gene Huff in there. And we also have some shots of George Knapp, but they didn't make the cut. But George said, please use them because I looked better back then. So
Wow.
we're probably going to utilize some of the stuff for some of our promo and all that. But yeah.
Well, that leads me to ask. So, you did a lot of technical research to recreate this, but you actually did genuine research as well in
Oh
this.
yeah.
Some of this came out very, very plainly in the film itself. I was very taken by the whole Google Earth
Oh yeah.
shenanigans, I think we can call it, and I would love for you maybe to explain that to people, if you don't mind.
Yeah. It was, I mean, I started obsessing with the Google Earth. Well, I started obsessing with Papoose Lake early on in the project. I had to really learn the whole landscape out there. So I had to recreate it. So it became an obsession. It became an obsession because it's a very difficult piece of land to study because it's in a restricted area. So there's very limited information on the geometry of the landscape. So it became something that I kept doing on my spare time, is researching satellite data through Cesium and a million other satellite companies and satellite images alongside Google Earth, obviously. And I as you know, we started this in 2021. I started working on this a long time ago. In 2021, the Google Earth evolves every year. They always have new images that they put up. Even when you want to go look for your own house, you'll sometimes see updates of your house on Google because they update them.
Right.
Anyway, I essentially was surprised that at a certain point in 2024, I was going back. I was always on Google Earth, and I was on Google Earth and Apple Maps Beta, which is a very unknown mapping system that Apple has. It's in beta still. It's been in beta for almost 2 years. And for those who know how to utilize it, Apple Maps Beta provides you very, very high resolution satellite images of Groom Lake, of Area 51, better than Google Earth. Okay. And so I was utilizing it for the Area 51 portion of our film, and would refer to Google Earth for the Papoose Lake because it was better. And suddenly, on June of 2024, I go back on it. I used to go on it almost every second day. And as I got on there, the landscape appeared kind of a yellowish color. It looked very washed out, very yellow, and it didn't reflect the right colors of the terrain and the landscape that I was very used to. Also, we could barely see the Joshua trees anymore as you zoomed in. And I thought, what's going on? I thought there was something wrong with it. So I started zooming out. I'm over Papoose and the little hillside where S-4. And as I'm zooming out, you could see this square box that had been applied right only over Papoose Lake and where S-4 is. And it had just been added on Google Earth in June of 2024.
It sounds like essentially they washed it out.
They washed it out.
That's
Absolutely.
essentially what it was. Yeah.
And it was it was blocked out only on Papoose Lake, which I thought was very bizarre. And I thought, what the hell? So you put your mouse on the on the actual block, and it says it gives you a date of when the satellite image came. So it said June 2024, and I would place my mouse outside of that block, and it would be an older, like a May 2023, which the landscape looked normal, but it's no longer where S4 is. So I thought, oh, this is recent. And so I was just curious. I start looking at, why did they do this? What's this? Anyway, there's an error in it, and they've actually fixed the error, but you could still see it. They didn't actually remove it because they would get caught if they did that. If you zoomed in, you can, wherever there's landscape, brushes, Joshua trees, you couldn't see anything anymore. It looked washed out. There's no detail. But on the actual dry lake, on the actual flat surface dry lake, for some reason, that new filter that they applied brought out all the tire tracks that are now extremely clearly visible on Papoose Lake. And I was like, whoa, I had never seen those before. And I thought, wait a minute, what the fuck is going on here? And so I started really mapping it out slowly. And I knew that map by heart. I knew that area by heart. And I thought, this is crazy. These are incredibly crisp, clear. So I started screen recordings, screen grabbing, because I'm like, what if this goes away? And I then there's a button on the top left of Google Earth that you can actually select previous satellite images, because you could do that in Google Earth. Could go like, oh, I want to see the satellite image in 2002. You could do that in Google Earth. So I clicked back to 1 year earlier, and now it goes back to normal. You could see the landscape, you could see the Joshua trees, but you don't see the tracks. It's like the opposite. So I think whatever they did, they unknowingly, or huge mistake, removed all the data off the landscape, but gave us a shit ton of data on the dry lake. I then went into Apple Maps beta to see if the tracks that were tracking that I could see on Google Earth, were they brushed out on Apple Maps beta. And I'm going to be doing a whole episode on this. So for everybody watching, Project Gravitur has a whole episode that's going to be coming out on this to show how unbelievably clear it is that whoever worked on the Apple Maps beta satellite images, there's airbrushing on every single area that there's tracks. So there's a deliberate intention. There's somebody intentionally removing the tracks on Apple Maps beta, but somebody messed up on Google Earth and shows them.
Not only that, though, in your film, you saw something else as well.
Oh, yeah.
You saw what looked like the hangar doors themselves.
Absolutely.
Can you just describe that a little bit? Because that actually was the thing that blew me away the most.
Yeah, that obviously blew me away when I found out about it, and also blew Bob away when he first found out about it because of how clear it is. And I'm gonna, while I say this, I'm also gonna address some of the naysayers that are on X, kind of calling me a low-level investigator because of that. And I want to sort of make a little bit of a point on something here. So that image is not a Google Earth image. The image that we were talking about, that you could see the hangar doors, is a high-resolution photograph taken in 2020 by a private pilot.
Yes.
I could say this here because it's now known, Gabriel Zeifman, who entered Area 51, the restricted airspace there, in 2020, and took a lot of pictures of the Nevada test site, the Area 51 Groom Lake complex, and around Papoose Lake. At a certain point, he had done a whole tour, and he was on the, let's call it the north end of the base, and was looking at the Papoose Lake and the hillside from the north point, looking at it at the south point, and had a clear path, a clear line of sight of the hill. At that point, he took his Nikon camera and his extremely high quality, a long, big lens that he had on that camera, and snapped, I think it's a total of 20 images, really high quality resolution images of that exact hill where Bob Lazar had claimed S-4 was. Initially, that was done to discount or discredit the Bob Lazar account, saying, you can see there's nothing there. And clearly, from the position he was at 17 miles away from that. Now, in a lot of commentary I've seen, people are saying he's 17 miles away. That's ridiculous. Nobody could take a picture at that distance. Somebody could go back to school. If anyone wants to go back to school, they can, and they could go get a course in photography. I don't think it's that expensive nowadays, and they could find out that, there's ways to do that today. And some of the equipment that was developed by Nikon and Canon and all that actually has the ability to go way further. So 17 miles does provide you enough information on a high resolution image.
I should have brought a screenshot of that for this, but people can see it in the film. But what you notice is it is absolutely distinct. You see a series of look like more or less parallel lines
So what happens?
that
Yeah.
are it's too geometric. It's clearly artificially
Absolutely,
artificial construction.
it's undeniable. And this is not something, and I'll repeat this. This was not something that we just said, oh yeah, that's what it is, and we just went with it. We forensically analyzed this like crazy for over a year and a half. We had people forensically analyzing this to make sure, are we pushing something that is actually just photo noise or anything like that? And it is 100% certain that what comes out as you take this image and you extract some of the data inside the image, which, by the way, they could also go back to school and learn how to do that, because a lot of these people sort of ended their career, their schooling when they were in elementary school, and now they're on computers just saying things. There's a way to extract data from high resolution images, and that is a forensic analysis that a lot of people do nowadays. So a lot of them say that they're forensically analyzing a picture, but they're also putting a blindfold on while they're doing that. So it doesn't really work when you do that. So when you bring out the real data that's in the image, suddenly you start seeing these angled rectangular formations that are geometric formations that show exactly 9 squares. Okay, one of them is the first one is a rectangular angled, and the 8 following are more square, and they just so happen to be exactly where Bob Lazar said they were in 1989. Yeah. They're not seen anywhere else in that picture, unlike some of the people saying that they're all over the picture, which I would love to see that data, because we've forensically analyzed it and never saw any other lines. So that geometric shape, or those geometric shapes, are actually there. And so, and
they are absolutely there.
And I say in my film, and Bob agrees, this does not prove flying saucers, nor does it prove that flying saucers were there. This has nothing to do with the Bob Lazar flying saucer claim.
But it does strongly suggest someone built that facility.
Right, because there's something there.
Into the mountain.
Absolutely. Yeah. Undeniable. Okay. So that is evidence that made it into the film. I also have additional evidence now that I'm going to be supplying through our channel that is going to be coming out very soon, and I'll gladly share that with you very soon. I was able, so my team and I also did a lot of work in trying to locate some of the maps from that area from back then. Initially, it was Gene who got them for us through the Department of the Interior of the United States. And we went into a deep dive for a few months with that. Unfortunately, the film was already done and we had already submitted it, but we found one map. There is one historical map of Papoose Lake that was done that was made in 1941, before all the government took over that entire land. That map clearly, and I mean absolutely clearly, shows a road going right into the hill where S-4 is located. Not near it, right into it.
Prior to 1941.
In 1941.
Yeah.
And so that, and it mentions a silver mine. So it is very likely that the S-4 facility might have been built on top of, utilizing the already existing mine shaft that was there, and obviously built a base out there. But the point is, how would Bob Lazar know this in 1989? How would he know at exactly that location that's what was there?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's so many things that Bob should never have known if he was just hoaxing this back in 1989, that he just happened to get exactly right. And I'm sure this is not necessary. Anyone who's watching this knows who Bob Lazar is and what his claims were. But, let's just step back. We're talking about really probably the most extraordinary, one of the most extraordinary direct eyewitness claims of the 20th century has to be Bob Lazar's claim that he saw a alien flying saucer at a hangar at a secret U.S. military base that we were trying to reverse engineer. I mean, that's got to be a top
That's
three.
as crazy as it sounds. Yeah, that's what it was.
And
Yeah.
that's fundamentally his claim. So it's very important that we get this right. One thing that I really liked what you did in this film is you had basically a chronological approach, more or less.
Yeah.
And I think that was very strong. So the viewer, you start really with Bob's, how he became interested in technology and putting jets on the back of cars, and his early meeting with Edward Teller in 1982, and all of these things. And you do a very artful job of walking us through Bob's life, in a sense, as it relates to this subject. That was very nice, because I think, especially now, there's a whole new generation of people who are now interested in UAPs or UFOs who weren't following this 10, 20 years ago. They're not, grizzled old veterans of this field. And they need a good way to get into this particular subject, the Bob Lazar story. I'll just share, when I wrote about Bob, I gave about 10 pages to Bob's story in my second volume of UFOs and the National Security State. That was I published that back in 2009, so a while ago. And I remembered researching Bob, really going deep into it in 05, 06, 07. And it was the worst. There were many pitfalls and landmines in the UFO field that I was writing about back then. It was Gulf Breeze, that was very controversial. Many, many others, but really none were more controversial than Bob.
That's right.
And I went into it with a lot of trepidation. I remembered my first meeting with the late Stanton Friedman, and I'll just mention him here. I was still in my 30s. I had just done my first ever lecture, or one of my first lectures in the UFO field. And Stan, we were sitting down at an airport on our flights back, and he grilled me on what I thought about Bob Lazar. And I always liked Stan, God rest his soul. But I was very angry with Stan even then, because I didn't like the fact that he was trying to, I'll just say, bully me into being a Bob Lazar skeptic.
Yeah.
And at that time, this was back in 2001, I didn't really know what I thought about Bob Lazar. I hadn't really gone deep enough to have an opinion, but I knew that I didn't like someone trying to tell me what to think. And but I guess my point is that there was such, and remains, I'm sure, on X and elsewhere, a very large skeptical community on Bob Lazar's story, and they are convinced that he's a hoaxer. And I just can't see that. Can you, you've spent so much time with Bob, maybe help make his case here? Why do you think, you've spent 4 years now working on this project, working with Bob, what would have convinced you that this was fake? And what are the things that have convinced you that this is legit?
Well, I could mention a lot of things. I could talk about the actual details, the historical details of the story. I could talk about the holes that are in the story that still exist today. And I can talk about my experience and how I went about in building everything based on what he was saying. So there's multiple layers that I could address here in terms of how I support the story and how I don't think that this is a lie. The first thing I will say is the fact that for many, many years, the story has been said and repeated in many different ways out there. And there's so much disinformation or misinformation, more, I should say that, where over time, the telephone game, you could read information online and pick out information that I eventually found out is completely inaccurate, because you can't really deter which one's right, that one or that one. And I found out in many cases, both were wrong. So what happens is that a lot of people, their starting point already begins with bad information. So this is something that is very frustrating, because you're already arguing with somebody who's claiming something that is not even the information to look at. Now, as far as things that I can say, he shared with me, shared it also with my team, and also shared it with Joe Rogan in the past. There, in regards to his education, because that's something that I think a lot of people really attack Bob Lazar on, and rightfully so, because if he doesn't have a paper to bring out, they can attack they can attack him. Yeah. It's a low-hanging fruit attack for somebody who doesn't believe the story. There, in regards to the MIT component, the only thing I can say is that there were national security issues there. Okay. And I can also say
for
that
people who don't know this, we'll explain. Bob had said he was at MIT and that he was at Caltech.
Correct.
And no one was able to find or get any kind of confirmation that he was at those schools.
Correct. Now, what's also important to note, specifically about MIT, that's the one I want to highlight, is that he said, I wasn't alone in this. So the government itself, he was at Los Alamos National Labs when this happened. He was sent to MIT. Now, the reason why this is important is because, and he also said, not everything the government does or was doing was legal. Okay. So there were things that were actually not necessarily legal, and they needed some scientists to go and learn certain things at MIT. And that's the reason why he was there. And there were other people there. He said to me, he said, look, in order for me to bring this out, I would be revealing things that would potentially put other people in a compromising situation. This had nothing, they signed papers, something to do with national security. And he says, there's no reason for me to ruin other people's lives just to satisfy a small percentage of people who are constantly bickering about my education. Yeah. So I understand that part. It's frustrating that it cannot be mentioned, but it's also something that I understood, and it made perfect sense to me. Now, I know it's frustrating to all of those who say we should still have something. Well, unfortunately, he's not going to want to go to jail just to satisfy you. And he would not be the only person ever to have been implicated in national security programs that were sending scientists to MIT. So that's a very important thing to also look into for history. As far as the work that I've done with him, and I mentioned this recently on Rogan, and I'll say it here. He gave me all the specifics of the sport model. I built the sport model craft, okay? And there's things that he mentioned that were impossible for anyone to have known, because you have to actually be in that environment to know the physical aspects of it. I can make you imagine being inside a flying saucer, Richard. I could make you say, hey, Rich, close your eyes. We're in a large circular room. It's got a low ceiling. It's made out of a dark, an unbrushed, an unpolished stainless steel type of metal. So you can kind of imagine it, okay? And those are things that we had to do throughout our whole process. Now, there's inside the craft, he was given access to the interior of this flying saucer one time only. And he kept insisting on how dark it was in there. So we kept asking him a whole bunch of questions. And he says, this was like that, this was like that. But he says it was still very dark. And then he kept repeating that. And I remember saying, okay, well, how are you even able to see anything in there? And so actually it starts off as him going, I'm walking into the hatchway, I'm crawling in the hatchway, and there's these extension cords that are in the way. So I had to kind of like maneuver against the extension cords. And I thought, extension cords? If you remember, because you and I are old enough to remember the story when it came out, as soon as you hear there's a flying saucer in a hangar being controlled by the US military, you're imagining the flying saucer, you're imagining that maybe somebody's inside, but we're not thinking extension cords. Okay, that's not front center in our mind. We're just going, what does it look like? Well, so he's explaining, yeah, there were lights in there. They had to put up some lights in there because it was dark in there. And that immediately made me go, yeah, that's true. I mean, of course, it's you have to have lights in there. And so he said there were 2 industrial-sized spotlights set up in the interior of the craft. They were specifically set up behind the amplifiers, the 2 existing amplifiers that were there, and the heads, the light heads of them, they have 4 head industrial lights, the big bright halogen lights, were pointed up to the ceiling of the craft. The craft itself is 52 and a half or 50, almost 53 feet in diameter. It's quite large, regardless of it, regardless of the components inside being so small, and it's tapered off. I mean, it's a disc. So as a human who's 5'10" or 6 feet, you cannot stand up inside the craft until you get to the center of the craft, because the ceiling just keeps getting higher and higher to the middle here.
Yeah.
So he said, I was only able to get up in close to the center of this thing, and my hair was touching the ceiling. And he's 5'10". Now, he kept saying it was very dark in there. And I'm thinking, there's 2 industrial spotlights in there, 2 tripods with 8 bright industrial halogen lights. So we went in there and we recreated them perfectly, by the way, not just creative. We went in there, found the models they had back in 1988, the halogen power, the luminosity that they emit.
Wow.
So we went forensically to do this. We didn't just put a light in there, okay? We light them up, and they're at max brightness for those halogens in 1988, and we couldn't see anything. And we're like, why is it so? So we bring in our camera. Now, remember, a 3D environment, again, is a real world. It's just a virtual world.
Mm-hmm.
So I can actually bring in a camera in there, okay? The same camera that we were using in our real interviews and making the film. There's a toggle in Blender that you could select your camera. You could use a Canon, a Sony, Blackmagic.
All of this is virtual, but it's so realistic.
And it's the actual settings of those cameras. I could have used a $25,000 red camera, but that was not the camera we were actually using ourselves. So I wanted to match the same quality of my shot. So we brought in the Blackmagic 6K camera, the same aperture, the same settings on our camera we added in Blender. And now we're inside the craft as if we would be inside the craft. And the lights are on, and the camera can't see anything. It's too dark.
That's quite interesting.
And I thought, why is it dark? And Christopher Matteau, who's on my team, who's the master of the universe in VFX, and I can't thank him enough for everything he's done for this. And everybody should look up Christopher Matteau, because he is, in my opinion, the next big thing in VFX. And he better just continue working with me, because I'm going to kill him. He knows that he's listening right now, and he's probably laughing. When I tell Chris, turn the lights on, and he goes, they're on. I go, well, are they at max? Yeah, they're on. I said, well, we can't see anything. He goes, I don't know, man. They're on. So we kept
the interior of the craft just too large to be able to accept.
So what happens is, and this is a really important part of physics. Here's forensic analysis right here. The craft is actually built to spec in real size, real materials, real everything. It's just virtual. So the luminosity hitting the ceiling of this craft, because of the material being an unpolished stainless steel type of material, for some reason, with the actual design of the craft, the light bounce is not actually causing light throughout the entire space. It is limited to about an 8-foot diameter space, making the rest of the floor very dark.
I'm kind of amazed that your software is able to reproduce this, honestly.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I believe you. I'm kind of blown away that you and we in general have this capability to get that accurate a virtual reconstruction.
Absolutely. In fact, and like I said earlier, you can actually recreate a real crime scene in Blender and have real physics. If somebody says I shot my gun and I hit the wall and the wall was made of cement, well, I could show you the physics of a bullet hitting that cement wall and where it would go, because it's actual physics. Okay, so it's not like cheap graphics just to look good. This is heavy files. Okay, multiple computers, thousands of dollars of investment just to have a render of a small piece. Now, I'm in the craft, and so I say, well, increase the intensity of the lights. And so he does just a little bit, and you still can't see anything. I go, double it. He doubles it. You still can't see anything. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? We actually had to increase the brightness of the lights inside the craft 20 times in order for our camera to be able to show the audience what it looked like inside that craft. And what I want to stress out with this is, if Bob Lazar was making this up, having two industrial size halogen lights pointed inside this space, if he had never seen it before, natural thought is it would be lit in there.
Yes. Right. I agree with you. I think that would be the logical thing you would assume.
So that
they would be able to do the job.
That was forensic analysis that pushed us into believing that he actually was in that space, because he couldn't have known it would have been so dark.
I think there are actually quite a few of these types of things that he mentioned that he didn't really need to. For example, as I'm recalling now, the sports model itself, there were no legs protruding out of it
at all.
Right. So it was sitting on his flat belly.
That's right.
Which, in UFO lore, especially back in the 70s and 80s,
right,
you'd always hear about craft with the little legs protruding out and sitting on it.
They weren't.
And that wasn't the case. That's just one thing. There's a lot of those types of
another thing, and you're the right person to talk about this with, is, and I don't know, I'm sure you'll remember, or I'm sure you know, but in 1989, the majority of the conversations that were circulating in the research of UFOs or crashed, like Roswell or Socorro or something like that, every conversation was really talking, whenever the military came into the conversation, it was always the U.S. Air Force. U.S. Air Force was
right.
predominant.
I know where you're going with this. Yeah, keep going. Yeah.
Predominantly the department of the military that was in charge of UFO recovery.
Everyone associated UFOs with the Air Force.
The Air Force. Thank you. And here is this guy who is coming out of left field. Nobody knows who he is. Not only is he saying that the crafts that he witnessed are not broken or in pieces, that they're intact, which was already quite controversial at the time, because not many people were saying we had intact vehicles. They were saying they were crashed vehicles. But he also said the Navy was in charge of the facility, which was also something that at that time was not a popular. It was not popular. Not a lot of people were talking about the U.S. Navy, nor were they talking about naval intelligence. So
I think overall that's fair. There were researchers even back then who were connecting the U.S. Navy to some of this. But overall I agree with you. I think that in certainly the public imagination, by far, you're talking Air Force, not Navy.
And the reason why, and I'm glad I'm talking to you about this, because and for a lot of people say, oh, Bob Lazar is a fraud. He met John Lear. John Lear told him and his friend Gene off a bunch of UFO stories, and he went out and created his own story. Now, that would imply that Bob Lazar was new to UFOs or the research, and that he just suddenly decided to come up with a fantastical story about flying saucers and the government. If that were the case, he would not have taken the time to do a deep dive and find out that there were some people talking about the Navy. He would have done a superficial verification of it, because I was there at the time, so I know what was being circulated most. And the U.S. Air Force would have been a much more credible portion to his story, because a lot of people say, yeah, I hear the U.S. Air Force, but he didn't say that. So I find that
he had so much. He knew what day and what location the test flights were.
And then they saw
it for years.
That's right. And then they saw, that's a big one that nobody's talking about, including on X with those elementary school students that are still talking, because when Gene Huff in the film says he saw the craft, he saw the test flight. He was there with Bob's wife at the time, and John Lear, and they saw it. Now, that is another witness to something that Gene Huff says Bob Lazar could not have invented what I saw. I saw a craft do incredible maneuvers at the exact time and place that Bob Lazar told me would happen.
It's great that you had Gene Huff in there.
Absolutely.
Because he, again, people don't always know this, but as you point out in the film, Gene was right there with Bob. They were buddies. Gene was a real estate appraiser. That was his thing, but they just were friends. Bob, for whatever reason, told Gene everything all throughout that. And Gene was there. And I remember learning about this even back in the 90s when the internet was a new little baby. And I remember going on the UFO boards, and Gene Huff was an active poster. Like he would post his own defense of Bob back then. I remember reading him, and I'm like, who's this guy? So, you know, he's an important part of the story. People sometimes forget him.
We all, unfortunately, not only do they forget him, but also are not taking the statement he made in my film is the very first time he made that statement. He was, he had said to me, he goes, Luigi, I will do this for your film. This is the very first time I talk about this. And I even asked him, have you ever told George Knapp? He said, no, I never did, which I found to be adding more credibility to Gene Huff, because he didn't want, first of all, Gene Huff was not looking for fame. And Gene Huff was not wanting to take away from Bob Lazar. Okay.
Right. Exactly.
So he just stepped out of the light and said, you know what? I don't need to put this out there. Plus, people are going to just think I'm crazy as well because I saw this. Now, it's important to also add that in regards to the veracity of the Bob Lazar story, there are elements of the story that Gene Huff can confirm. There are elements of the story that Mario Santa Cruz can confirm. And there are
other Bob friends from back in the day. Yeah.
And there are elements of the story that George Knapp can confirm. And George Knapp went further. There's things that are not in my film that I had to cut out for reasons of it's too long, and I didn't want to make it too long. But George Knapp had 6 witnesses that were going to come forward to confirm S-4 and that Bob was there. And they were all threatened and were never put on camera. But George Knapp says this openly in interviews. If this was some type of lie, then that means that George is in on it, Gene is in on it, Mario's in on it. All these people decided to all get on board with this lie. And I don't like it when I hear people saying this is just all bullshit, because you're allowed to not believe the story that Bob Lazar is telling you. But at this stage, after all these years, after all this research, after all these witnesses are coming forward and are supporting a lot of the things that Bob is saying, you're essentially now also attacking the other people. And you're saying all these people are also lying. And what's the purpose? What have they gained? And you know, for those out there who think that Bob Lazar is a grifter and he's making a lot of money out of this, I can tell you right now, that is not true. I can also say that Bob Lazar had not benefited at all coming forward, especially financially, for many, many years. So why come out public in 1989 in a time where, first off, talking about UFOs and UAPs was not that popular? Let's face it, it's not like today where the conversation is becoming much more mainstream. But this came out in 89. He came out and said the government is reverse engineering flying saucers and they're intact. Nobody had ever said that. They're at the exact location at Papoose Lake. Nobody had ever mentioned Papoose Lake. It's important to mention the world did not know what Area 51 even was. Right. Correct.
Until Bob's interviews with George.
That's right.
That was, I mean, I think it was something that was known locally to, a select group.
Two people.
But this was not anything that the world really knew about. It was Bob Lazar who brought that out to the rest of us.
So all these things put together, I'm not even going to address element 115 because the synthesized version that they discovered is not even the same one that he had witnessed at S4, but it is a real element that's on the periodic table
Well,
now.
we've not been able to create a stable version of it
Correct.
that exists
But
in
it
more than
is.
a couple of microseconds.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that was all interesting, as well as you're really getting into some of the technical and scientific things that Bob discussed, which let me just, I'll because we're going to run out of time here, but
Sure.
he talks about how the craft had the 2 propulsion modes, Omicron and Delta. And before we started, I asked you about that, and I guess I must have forgotten that Bob brought this up. I actually didn't recall this, but I found the discussion of that very, very interesting. Essentially, Omicron,
low power mode.
it was like a different. It had different emitters, I think, as he called it, for lift and maneuvering.
Yeah,
and then there was the Delta, which used all 3 of the emitters, I think,
correct.
for pulse. This was interesting for pulsed long distance jumps in space. So Omicron was like for the atmosphere, I think.
Right.
Essentially. And then Delta was when you're beyond the atmosphere. And I would love to ask Bob this question, which was, does he have any idea when you're doing these jumps in space?
Yeah.
Like how much distance do you cover when you're doing these jumps? He may not know that either.
Well,
it made me curious. You know, if you're going to do interstellar travel in this manner, how would that work in practice?
So it's interesting because he talks about it in the film. We also have a lot of additional interviews with Bob talking about this that didn't even make it. They didn't even make the cut of the film. But the craft has 2 modes. Again, Omicron, low power mode, just for it to cruise around here. And then you have Delta, which is high power mode. Okay, so it's like an interstellar mode. It's where the craft can travel at great distances. So how about I have Bob Lazar tell you exactly what that means?
That'd be awesome. Can you share the screen there?
Yeah. So sit next to me here.
Hello, Bob.
Hi there.
Well, it's really great to see you. And we actually met in person a number of years ago, but I'll skip the details on that. It's good to see you again. And Luigi and I have had a great conversation about the film, which I personally think is really the best film treatment of your story that I've ever seen. And
I agree with that. Yeah,
it was just superbly done. We were just talking about the 2 propulsion modes of Omicron and Delta,
right?
And I guess I just had this off the cuff question, which was, do you or does anyone have any idea how the jumps in Delta mode actually work? Like, for example, how substantial, if this is designed for interstellar travel, presumably. Do you have any idea, or have you speculated how in practice that would even work?
Well, I mean, first of all, maybe it's not intended for interstellar travel. I mean, maybe they're using, their gravity drive. Maybe it pokes into another dimension. I mean, we have no information on that at all. However, it's clear it would work in empty space. And as far as, again, the range, how far each jump would be, I have no information on that. I know how long it takes for it to recycle, but or recharge, whatever you want to call it. But it's all speculation. I'm not even sure they would ever know the maximum range or what a typical jump would be, and they would never risk trying something like that. In fact, I sincerely doubt they'd even take it, even into orbital space. Just the chances of losing such a prized possession would be too great.
Yeah, well, that would make sense. One of the things that struck me in the film, this relates directly to you, and I'd not ever been aware of this before, but when you were outside watching the test of the demonstration of the craft. Okay, so I'd heard you talk about this before, I'm sure, and I know I'd read about it. But I didn't remember the craft disappearing above you.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't recall that. And the other thing that struck me was that there was a radio communication going on from you guys on the ground and whoever was inside the craft, piloting it, I suppose. And your thought was, how the hell are they even carrying on radio communication? Because the nature of the craft's propulsion, as you pointed out, had this intense, I guess we could say, gravity shield around it.
Yeah,
would have,
right. Mm-hmm.
So could you talk a little bit about either of those two aspects and your experience of watching this craft?
Boy, I don't know if I could relate the experience to you, but it was, at least you saw what it was. The VHF radio, it just seemed physically impossible for any radio signal to propagate through that field at that intensity. I'm actually surprised you can see the craft at all. Once they really power up the amplifiers, it's really amazing that any form of energy can come out of the craft. Again, this is one of the things that makes me think it's not really gravity. There's some other force at play here, and we're just not familiar with the way it works. I mean, maybe there is certain bandwidths, like at lower frequencies, in the 100 megahertz range, that just naturally pass through the field like that it's just transparent to. And higher and lower frequencies, it becomes opaque. It's kind of all guesswork, really.
Many years ago in the VHS era, you had either one or multiple VHSs describing the physics of these craft. I remember this very well. I don't have those VHS tapes any longer. Just too
Probably
bad.
the government Bible tape or something.
But
Yeah,
they were pretty awesome. And in those, you talked about how you believe the craft somehow bent gravity, and I cannot recall all the specifics of what you said at that time. But I was struck by in this treatment that you had with Luigi here, that as you just said now, you weren't really sure, like, is this thing playing with gravity, or what is the force that it is manipulating? And I guess that struck me as something I wasn't expecting to hear. So that was quite interesting.
Well, the only reason we made statements like that at that time was because we were so pressured to come up with results every single day. In fact, even in fractions of the day. So we were really jumping to conclusions. Well, it looks like this. This is gravity. And, what did you find? It's a gravity generator, and so we just really wanted to make it look like, we had a handle what was going on, but still there were so many questions. And I can't sign my name to anything, as we absolutely know that. Literally every aspect of the craft remained a mystery from the time I got there to the time I left. I mean, we had guesses and, educated guesses, and we observed how the things worked, but I can't say we ever came to any hard conclusions about anything relating to power and propulsion. We just had possibilities.
I also was very glad to hear you talking about the three projects. I mean, Project Galileo, which that was your project, but Project Looking Glass and Project Sidekick.
Yeah.
Which the thing that hit home with me about Project Sidekick was how this is the weaponization, it seems to me, of the technology that the United States military complex really, like, I'm trying to understand exactly what they were trying to do, but it seemed
they
like
just want a weapon. I mean, it was pretty clear.
like amplifiers to
the weapon. They're
create
not
a particle beam, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, they're not trying to convert this into some form of amazing transportation to make life good for people. They want a weapon, and they also want to know how to disable this weapon. And they made that clear as a bell. Yeah, the gravity amplifiers, look, a lot of problems with, firing particles and whether they're charged or not through the air is, you have a problem with divergence. And if you have some form of energy to keep everything collimated into a tight beam, then, energy weapons like that become possible. So I don't know if there was something on the craft that emitted particles and they were using that as a particle weapon, or if there were, I doubt there was a weapon on the craft. I mean, I didn't see anything like that, or they had come up with their own, particle generator or accelerator of some kind, and they wanted to use the emitters to, keep it collimated. But I wish I knew more about the weapon potential of the craft, and the metallurgy is another thing that really I was dying to get more information on.
Yeah, I'm sure the material science of that has to be off the charts. But I appreciated what you had to, even the brief remark about Project Sidekick. And the other thing, if you could, Project Looking Glass has kind of really hit the UFO lore. People love talking about it as far as time travel. But you really explain this much better. It's not a time travel program. Would you just mind, for people watching, to give the your understanding of what Project Looking Glass really was?
I think it's just, again, this is a byproduct of the propulsion system. It produces, we'll just call it gravity for now. A gravity wave, which we know gravity, time, and space are all intertwined. So, as gravity increases, time slows down. And with the system producing an intense gravitational field, time will get distorted. And we're just talking fractions of a second. It's not like, you're ever going to be able to dial in a date and travel in time. I mean, it's just, we're just looking at a distortion, and, probably a difference in fractions of a second, maybe a little more than that. But there's no real time travel potential, at least in the configuration, that I saw. I think we just found it fascinating because there's no machine, nothing we can do that ever affects the flow of time. So they're particularly fascinated that here is a device that for the first time in history affects the flow of time.
Yeah, exactly. And so Looking Glass is really to measure the distortion of time in that.
Yeah. And, I mean, with that knowledge, maybe that could lead to a path one day where you can control giant chunks of time. But I would doubt that.
Yeah.
The power, it's just the power requirements would be astronomical. It'd be like you'd need the energy of an exploding sun, to to travel back and stop the Kennedy assassination or something like that.
Yeah, right. Kill baby Hitler. Who knows?
Yeah.
Right. One of the things that came out also that I did not know about, was the weird effect in the laboratory of the candle flame.
Yeah, but
that was crazy. Would you mind describing that as well for listeners?
Yeah, sure. We put a lit candle right in front of the emitter and turn the reactor on. And normally the candle was just a kitchen candle. It produced light and a flickering flame. And again, this is kind of along the same vein as the radio and the craft. Certain things shouldn't happen. When the reactor was brought up to power and it produced a gravitational field, the flame stopped flickering.
Yeah,
but
that was the crazy part of it.
Continued to emit light, but it wasn't moving. The flame should have essentially disappeared because it should have bent light. And look, outside the craft bent light, and we saw that. But here, it's only affecting kinetic energy. It's only affecting the flicker of the candle and allowing light to come through. Now, one of the other experiments or demonstrations, he took the candle away, and then I think he rotated like another 20 degrees, which apparently increased the power of the emitter, and it made a small black dot in the air where you could see all the light was bent away from it.
Like a little black hole just hovering.
Yeah, I hate to say black hole because then people think
that's what it looked like.
Yeah, it did. It looked like a black ball. All right. So, again, are there different frequencies that pass through this field, and can you adjust the field and make different forms of energy transparent to it? It's something very unusual, and gravity would not do that. So
Yeah.
I'm more convinced.
The thing that struck me about this film, and this happened in other film treatments, I don't want to say this is the only time, but there were so many small details that you mentioned. The reverse American flag on the craft was just like just like toss that in there. It's like, what's that doing on there? And that was interesting. The fact that, like the part of the craft, the part that you were watching in the lab was actually cut out of the craft itself. Like,
those are actually two good points. And I kind of have a semi-working theory in my mind. Why was the American flag there? I mean, I know we love to stick those on everything, but I mean, someone finally explained why they put the flags on backwards, because it's you move forward and it's
kind of blowing back. Yeah,
all right. So all that, but what I always thought is I never saw the hatch or the cover, and I just assumed it was removed. But what if it wasn't? What if it's just integral as the waveguides collapse upon each other, don't get any thicker, and the way the metal moves? What if the hatch or opening, whatever you want to call it, is actually there and it just closes itself up? Maybe they put the flag over there so they knew where it was, because once it closed, there's no seams or anything. So it might have just been let's throw a flag on there. We know 6 inches to the right is where
that's
it is.
a really good thought.
A really good point.
That's
the first time I hear it too. It's
I thought that's what I would have done, right? Put a sticker on there so you could find it. And what was the other thing you just mentioned?
Oh, well, the fact that they cut part of this interior out.
Yeah, that I think, as I've said recently, they had to be so sure and so comfortable with doing that. I mean, where they knew it wasn't going to affect the operation of the other amplifiers, where they could still use it, and it would still operate, taking it out of the craft. So this is what made me think this operation at S-4 had to be there for a really long time, and it just wasn't treated like something that was new and unknown. I think I said on the Joe Rogan show, you would expect it to be like the lunar receiving lab. Everything would be sterile. Everything would be have its place. It would not be sitting in an open hangar with dust blowing on it, and you wouldn't be hacking things out of it. It just had to have been there. I mean, I think for decades.
It's like they've been there and done that, right?
Yeah. And I think they were, hey, we haven't got anywhere with it. Let's start chopping it apart and see what happens,
Here's a kind of a wacky question, but this has come up in some other allegations, and I would like to ask you this, because I've never heard you discuss this ever. Did you ever have a sense that the craft itself, don't laugh, had its own sense of consciousness or awareness?
Oh, I've heard that before, but no.
Yeah, okay. I didn't think so, because I never.
It seems just like a hardcore machine with advanced materials, but no, I haven't. I wondered that myself, because you wondered how it was controlled. I mean, did they mentally connect with the craft? Which, I mean, they might do, but no, I didn't. That had even occurred to me, but I didn't see any evidence of that.
Okay, well, I'm glad I put that out there and asked. I think I was telling Luigi before you came on just how impressed I was with the whole recreation of your story, and the graphic recreations of younger you, which were very nicely done.
Job. It amazed me.
Pretty damn good.
We did a good young Bob.
Yeah, you really did. You really
you rocked some good hair. The whole thing worked very, very well. So
we'll have to do an age regression for Richard as well. But he looks good still. We're gonna wait for that later. And
I'll show you some of I had some really good mullitude working back in those days.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
Beautiful business in front, party in the back.
Love it.
I
Yeah.
was all about that. I'll give you some of that. So, a couple of other things. Oh, I was always impressed by the fact that not only did you state the ship, the craft moved on element 115, but it was 223 grams of element 115. And I suppose that's something that you learned while you were at the facility. That must have been something that was told to you. I wondered, how did you know it was
No, I
223 grams?
physically just weighed the triangle. And
Oh, that was simple.
yeah, I mean, I physically just put it on a scale. And they had more than one piece of 115, and that was cut exactly like that. And they both weighed exactly the same. So let's just assume.
The implication of that would have to be that's an ET hand-me-down. I mean, that would not have been something, do you think, that we would have been able to manufacture? I mean, the most we can do now is a microsecond. I beg your pardon?
Yeah, we were trying to manufacture it. I mean, we had some of the discs, and that's why I brought it to Los Alamos and cut it.
Right.
So I don't know what the purpose of that was, because I don't see them running out of fuel. Again, that was beyond my pay grade, I guess.
Do you ever, I mean, I really wonder what it is like for you today. You know, you went through decades, and I'm sure you still deal with haters and doubters and debunkers.
Oh, yeah.
I know it was super intense in the 90s and the early 2000s. It might have let up a little. I will just say, I was telling this to Luigi before, in one of my historical treatments of the UFO history, I spent about 10 or 12 pages on your story. You know, this is back in, I was writing in 2005, 2006. And all I tried to do is I went back through all of your original interviews that I could find. You were just incredibly consistent throughout. You never overreached. You always said, if I don't know something, I don't know it. That was always my impression. And actually, I'll mention this here. In 2001, I met Stanton Friedman for the first time. And I got to know Stan pretty well over the years.
My biggest fan, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Stan loved you. Stan sat me down. We were in an airport on the way flying back to our respective cities. And I was like the new guy in town in the UFO community. And Stan really wanted to know what I thought about you. And he wanted to make damn sure that I was going to be a skeptic about your story. And that kind of pissed me off even at the time. I was like, well, I don't really know what I think about Bob Lazar because I hadn't really dove in. I had written a previous book that only went up to the early 1970s. I didn't know a damn thing about anything after that. But I knew that I wanted to make up my own mind. And I became aware automatically that your story was the biggest landmine in all of the history. There were other controversial things, but none were more than yours. And I will not, I don't mind saying this. I was really afraid of like diving in. I didn't know what, like, whether to do this the right way, the wrong way. I didn't know how to reach you at the time. I just didn't know what to do. So I just was careful, and I came out as a believer early on. And always there were people who were approaching me saying, Lazar's full of shit. But then there were other people who were equally like adamant on your behalf. Did you know Ron Regier?
I've heard the name a lot. I forget. Yeah.
Well, I have the feeling like Ron was a big supporter of you. And he was state of Utah MUFON director for a while. And
I think it was a friend that sounded like a friend of John Lear's.
Could have been. I can't recall. Ron's a good guy. And I was at an event where I was just about to publish my book, and everyone wanted to know like about you in that book. Colonel John Alexander was like a total skeptic and hater and debunker, but Ron Regier was like, absolutely every single word Bob said is true. And he must have known you because he said some very, very specific things about how you love to blow shit up in the desert.
Well,
And,
like he knew me. Yeah. I mean, I've forgotten I've forgotten a lot of these people from the past.
Well, you were always the lightning rod. You know, your story was the lightning rod.
Yeah.
But I guess my question for you is, well, it's a silly question, but it must feel somewhat good to get some level of international acceptance and recognition for your story, which I don't know.
I mean, it feels good to be vindicated to some degree, but I actually don't like the attention. So, you know, with Luigi's film coming out, I'm pretty much going to stay home until people forget this. And it goes back to the way it was. But I mean, it does feel good. I mean, back in the 90s, you know, they were all detractors and a few people here and there that believed the story. But, you know, it doesn't bother me. I'm just a private person and really don't like having the spotlight shined on me.
That was always my impression all throughout, was like, Bob Lazar is a guy, I'm sure this isn't totally true, but a guy who just doesn't give a shit what people think one way or the other about him. I don't know if it was that callous. Is that sort of accurate?
I'm good, yeah.
You're just like, I'm putting this out there. It's true. If you don't like it, go to hell.
Yeah, but that's basically how it was, and how it is. But
well,
I have a Zoom call in about 2 minutes.
Yeah, we'll wrap this up here. Bob, thank you for being here with me, and Luigi. Luigi, thank you for doing this. My wife Tracy and I watched the film just earlier today, and it was Tracy's observation. She said it's really great that one mad scientist gets to cover another mad scientist. She really meant that as the highest compliment, but it's really true. You're both these very detailed, like very meticulous, accurate individuals. And I feel like this was a teamwork that was really destined to be. So it's wonderful that this film came out in the way that it did. I'm very happy for both of you. Congratulations.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
All right, well, Bob, I'll let you go on your call, and Luigi, we could wrap this up here as well.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
So wonderful. Thank you for being here, Bob Lazar and Luigi Venditelli.
Yeah. Thank you. All right.
Thank you very much, guys.
Hey, it was a pleasure, Rich. This was great. It's
Right
always
back at
great
you.
to talk, man. So now the next thing is we got to hang out together.
Okay, well, we will set that up. I'm still recording. This is all going out there.
Excellent.
And oh, Luigi, so I will have your any links to your film.
Sure. Yeah.
Just send them to me. I'll put them down below. Any other relevant websites, links, anything like that? Just give those
check
to
it
me.
out. It's on Amazon. It's also on wearenotалone.com. So it's available on both platforms.
Very
Check
good.
it out. Hope you guys like it. Yeah.
Well, I'm giving it my own personal endorsement as a superb work. Honestly, artistically accurate. I think your sense of meticulous detail really comes through very well here.
Thanks.
So
Rich.
I knew I was looking forward to this. We've been talking about this for a while, but I have to honestly say it exceeded even what I was believing it would be. So well done.
Thank you. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, you deserve all this success that this film generates. And we talked just before we started recording. You'll have another project. We'll discuss that in the future. You may not want to get into that, but that also seems like that will be a very good project if you get into that one.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I'm sure that it'll be a good one. All right. Well, thank you again, Luigi Venditelli, for being a guest on this program. Folks, do check the description below to learn more about the film Project Gravitur. It is I think it's the definitive treatment of the Bob Lazar story at this point. So thank you, Luigi, for taking it on and making this a labor of love for 4 years.
Thank you. And thanks to everybody. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. I'll be back again soon. And until then, let's keep fighting the good fight. Later.